Why don't we talk about fear? Fear is very, very important to talk about, to think about, to grapple with. Fear plays a big role in our day-to-day lives, doesn't it? Fear kills. We all know that. I mean, you've heard that all your life. You must know that. Fear also saves lives, doesn't it? When you think about it, you're motivated by it to get out of a deadly situation. So it saves your life. And sometimes you're immobilized by it in a deadly situation and you lose your life. You see what I mean? So I guess what I'm saying is you kind of have to make fear your friend, or at least become very familiar with it and how it works and how it's useful and how it's deadly. But I would say the worst kind of, one of the worst kind of fears, well, think about this, is the nagging, ongoing fear. Worry. Worry is that's a form of fear. My mother lived in a constant state of worry. And I think that kind of constant state of anxiety and worry comes from not setting up your life properly. Sometimes it's, circumstances beyond your control. Some people are just thrust for one reason or another into circumstances they cannot control. But you do what you can to get yourself in behind the controls and run your life. So eventually you become an adult, and you are the captain of your ship. So you choose whether or not you navigate into dreadful waters or safe, calm waters. And some of us just by our nature have to go into those dangerous situations. I lived there as a child. But again, my fear was mostly immediate. My mother, because she had a poverty mentality and we were always on the run, running from my father or from circumstances or whatever, she was in a constant state of dread and fear and worry. But my biggest fears were living through the situation I was in and navigating the dangers of being on the street and things like that. And so those are two, in my mind, distinctly different types of fear. So what does the former benefit you? Is that the kind of fear you're having? How many people, if so, would love to trade circumstances with you? People who think of people in captivity, not by their own fault, people who have been enslaved, or whatever, for this exercise, kidnapped, and they're living their lives that way. And they probably would think, if you presented your fears to them, man, I would love to have those concerns. Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? What am I going to have to do to take care of this? I know certainly those are real concerns and very valid, but I just think you can get your mind into a place where it doesn't eat you alive. And again, a lot of that is setting up your situation so that it is such, that it's calmer waters. But yeah, I was always saying that, a lot of the stuff is very immediate. Like when I was a kid, I would find, I've said many times, I've had multiple guns pointed at my head, loaded guns. That's just the way it was. It would take me a while to explain, but multiple occasions pointed at me, and some at my head. And I've had knives pulled on me by people who were in my house in the middle of the night trying to rob or kill or pillage, I don't know. Just those situations, I've been in them, where it's pressing, it's urgent, your life is in danger in the moment. That's different, and that kind of fear, well, I would say it shouldn't stay with you, but it does. And you have to So both are lingering, aren't they? As I think about it, you know, you have the worry and dread that's about things that may never happen, and then you have the immediate fears that are just in that moment, that are live and active, and depending on the intensity of them, they may stick with you. Mine have, and I try to eschew them. I try to liberate myself from them, and I do for the most part, but it affects me. It affects how I travel, where I want to go. It may have saved my life, and in fact, I know it has, because I was a street kid, and I learned to energetically avoid conflict. That was part of my survival training on the streets. In fact, my ne'er-do-well father once said that to me, because this was a man who had been in many, many brawls and deadly fights and in jail and in prison. And he said, energetically avoid conflict. And he learned that by experience. So I share that with you. But that's how a fear affects me currently. It keeps me somewhat safe, but how safe are we ever really? I mean, as I always say, it's always the thing that you're not worrying about or fearing that gets you. Let that sink in. Remember that. You know how we always say, my mother always said, my father always said, well, maybe my kids will quote me as saying what I always say, and that is, I have learned one thing about fear and worry in my life, and that is that I am not qualified to know what to take on, what to worry about, what worry to have, what fear to have, because I'm usually quite wrong about these things. I worry, and somehow or another it just doesn't happen. And it's not because of worrying. I mean, I could just, calmly, safely solve my problems without all the worry. So therefore, I have just decided I am not qualified to know what to worry about. Just for the sake of comedy and comic relief, I'll give you a recent example of how my fear from the old days kind of rules the day still. It kind of controls my movements and my behavior. I met someone through a marketplace ad. I went to see a man about a truck, and I'm a pretty good judge of character, given my experiences, I'd like to think. And so I met the guy. He was an old guy, and he had a truck that he wanted to trade for a tractor that I have. And so I went and met him. Well, a wild card was presented. A friend of his came over, and we got to talking, and we were all having a good time and looking at the car and starting the motor. And then he said, "Oh, you ought to go see Jay's his cars, and he's got a bunch of them over at his property." He said, "Yeah, come on, take a look at my." So I went over to this property, and I'm talking with this guy. I'm thinking, this is really cool. He's got this whole compound out in the, kind of in the country, not too far from where I live, but out a bit. And he was showing me the cars, and I was just delighted to see these beauties. And then he said, "Oh man, I got some more. Come check these out." And it was this big shed, this big garage, like 2-story, like a big commercial garage that he had on his property. And it was an older structure. He said, "Come on in." And I walked over there with him, and as I was walking over there, that little thing that's been with me since I was a child, it started a little alarm. "What are you doing? Where are you going? Were you going to walk in that building? You're kind of out in the woods, you're very rural here. I wouldn't go in that building, Jay. You don't know this guy. Maybe he has lamps made out of people, dummies like you that walk in there. You don't know. Don't." I laugh at myself because it's kind of hysterical. It's tragic. I recognize that it is my tragedy but You never know. This very charming guy, really liked the guy too. That was what made it really sad. I was like, geez, Jesus, I can't even trust this man that I like, but I don't know him. So I know if and when he sees this, he'll find it hysterical. So I have video of this. I walked into the structure, and I was just keeping my body near an exit, and I was looking around and I was filming. And he said, come check this one out. He wanted me to go check, and I was like, oh yeah, that's nice. And I pointed my camera at it, and I was very hesitant to go into that garage with that stranger. As a grown man, I mean, I might have a fight on my hands. I might have nothing. Somebody could catch you from behind. You don't know. All that stuff goes through your head if you've been in the situations I've been in. And it could have been one of those situations where it saved my life, where the guy didn't want to take a chance on attacking me when I had the exit right behind me and you were pulling the gun. So I pulled my phone out. I had my phone out. I did some filming. He said, come on, check this one out. And I said, hang on a second. And I took my camera and I quickly texted my wife a video of him saying, come on in. So if I'm missing, at least she's got the video of my murderer saying, come on in. Anyway, I just thought I find it hilarious and sad at the same time. But it's when I think back, that kind of mentality saved me from a lot of trouble. You know, like the story I tell about how when the bad guy, 3 o'clock in the morning in the French Quarter in New Orleans, I'm coming home from my bar, and the kid is walking on the other side of the street towards me, and then we're walking towards each other on opposite sides of the street, and then he shifts over to my side. Young kid from the ghetto in the middle of the night, and people get killed all the time. 365 people died or so the year we left New Orleans in the 80s. That's a person today. I didn't want to be that person. And there that kid is coming at me. Walk on my side of the street, like nobody out, just very, very dark night in the French Quarter. And so I unbuttoned my shirt. I've told this story many times. And I slid my hand into my shirt down by my waist. And damn if that kid didn't walk back to his side of the street and keep on moving. And I walked very confidently with a hint of arrogance and come get me kind of attitude. I had to have that. I didn't have a gun, but he didn't know that. Not long after that, I started carrying my pistol everywhere. So, fear kills, fear saves. Now, let's talk about the current situation in this country. We have had, today's inauguration day, by the way, of President Donald Trump. And I've been watching some of it on and off, and I'm going to go rewatch much of it. But in the couple of years, or especially in the months preceding this, there's been a lot of fear. Somewhat manic, somewhat maniacal, if you will. I mean, some of you, those in fear, would say that it's justified fear. I wouldn't be convinced of that. You don't know what's going to happen till it happens. You think you know, but you really don't. You don't know what's going to. I mean, this president is certainly forecast some things that are going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be death and destruction to the way of life of Americans. I think there's going to be a lot of good things that will happen because of this presidency. We just have to wait and see. But all of that fear, what did it serve? What did it do? It just bred hostility and more fear and more anger. It was just like this fire that kept getting stoked by fear. Fear is really, I think philosophers and psychologists say all all of our fears are rooted in one fear, and that is the fear of death. And we're all going to die. That's the funny thing. maybe death is funny. I don't know. But if we're all going to die, what's the point in fearing it? Right? I know I'm a human being, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'm not afraid of death. I love it when people say that. It's just, to me, that's a bunch of bullshit. I think a healthy person is fearful to a degree, because again, fear saves lives. And if you're not afraid of dying, that's like pain. It's like the pain mechanism. That's a mechanism to save you from bodily injury. It's a horrible thing to have, pain, but it's a very, very useful thing. I remember hearing a story about a little kid who didn't have it's a neurological disorder, and he didn't have that pain part of his system. And he would stop his little bike with bare feet and rub the soles of his feet off and stuff like that, and was constantly in a state of healing and bloodiness and scabbing. And so you have to have fear. It's a survival mechanism. So, but just remember that your relationship with it and your understanding of it are critical to a healthy, prosperous life. And knowing when, I think the key would be knowing when your fear is righteous, when it's good fear, motivating fear, and when it's just useless and destructive. So this is just food for thought today. It's just stuff that's bubbling up in my head. I think because I was thinking about fear on a bunch of different levels today, and then that inauguration thing popped up, and so now that's finally happening. But this will be a big experiment, won't it? This, all of this fear that all of these people carried for so long, and another funny thing was that a lot of these people were saying for the past month or so since the election, since November 5th, well, he's your president now. Have things gotten any better? It was pretty funny. People didn't understand that he wasn't actually carrying out the duties of president until this week, right? Or wouldn't start till this week. But now this is the biggest experiment in unnecessary fear that I can remember in my lifetime. With all of these millions of people, these millions of American, hell, billions of people worldwide who were cut from that cloth and thought that way, were so horrified about the prospect of this bad orange man becoming president that they became quite deranged, quite maniacal in their fear. And now we get to see if they were really right to be that fearful, if he will in fact destroy their lives and the way of life for millions of people. I don't see that coming. I see him, well, there again, that it becomes a more specific conversation than I want to have. But I just wanted to cue you into that, to watch that as an experiment. Sometimes experiments just happen willy-nilly. They're not planned. And this is a great one. To see if fear is justified, if that mass hysteria was justified. Oh, there will be many, maybe even most of them of that thought, of that mentality, who say it was justified. See, he's destroyed the world. But I think most people, hopefully most people in general, will see it for what it is. All right? So let's kind of relax, control our fears, and let's watch and see what happens in this new great experiment on justification of fear. All right. We'll talk soon more about this. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.